Hey guys, and welcome to a bit of a random chat about football with the Premier League coming back in a few weeks. I thought I'll get a few other people along. I've been doing a couple of videos just with updates and things, but I just wanted to get a few other people along who know what they're talking about, just to give their views on kind of football coming back and stuff like that. So I want to welcome Tim Payton, who works in sports communication, and Nigel Phillips, who works in the financial industry, and they're both colleagues of mine at the Arsenal Supporters Trust. And the Arsenal Supporters Trust have been doing virtual events like this pretty much since the lockdown started. So visit arsenaltrust.org for more information. So, guys, football's finally coming back. I think, Tim, you made a prediction that football will be back before hairdressers are back, and it turns out you were spot on. But is it the right decision?
Yes, I think it is. It's coming back under a framework that has been carefully put together between Public Health England, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, and sporting bodies. So very strict health protocols will be followed. Probably the safest place to be over the next few weeks would be a Premier League footballer or an England cricketer, because they're now living with very high medical standards, regular testing, lots of health sanitation. And they're ready. So I think it is right that they come back. It can be done safely. It will provide content for people to watch, which I think is really positive for people who've been stuck at home with not a lot to do. And importantly, it helps keep football kind of healthy. It might not be ideal to have behind closed doors football, but it keeps the money flowing. It keeps the integrity of the competition by producing the result for the 1920 season. So yeah, I'm happy that football is back, I think, on the 17th of June.
Nigel, what are your views?
Well, I agree with Tim's comment there about integrity. I think absolutely the season should be finished. I'm less comfortable about it happening now and the way it's happening. I really don't see why it couldn't be put together with the start of next season and almost run we've got 9 games now and 38 next season. We could have had a 47-game season as such with no break. And football's not all about the Premier League. Obviously, there's a massive interest and there's huge money involved in this. But we've got to look further down the pyramid to understand what football actually does in society. So, this is touching a lot of people in terms of the interest in it. But I think football itself should be looking a little bit wider to see how other clubs can be supported rather than the Premier League 20.
Why is it that you think football shouldn't be coming back now then? And then presumably you mean bring it all back in maybe August. But what is it? Is it health reasons? Is it the NHS? Are you worried that we'll get a second peak because of football? What's the thinking behind it?
I think for me, the sole reason it's coming back now is the fear of losing the TV money. Not deferring it, but losing it. And so many clubs, and they're not, no one's declaring this, are absolutely desperate. It's like it's their next fix of cash. There's no money coming in from tickets. There's no money for next year's season tickets. So it's absolutely vital that they keep this television money to keep the summer months ticking over. But I don't know if you've watched any of the German football. Yes, it's different because we probably don't identify with the players, but you will quickly realise what an anodyne spectacle it is without having anyone in the ground.
And Tim, I mean, you're obviously, we've got two good opinions here, actually. I mean, you're obviously, you think it's spot on that it's back. Do you think it will, though, take some resources away from the NHS? Because presumably you'll still have to have an ambulance at every ground, some health, medical people there, obviously, in case there are injuries to players and stuff like that. Do you think that would impact?
I think almost to the zero extent. So all of the health providers in the ground will be people that are employed by the clubs or private contractors. There are arrangements with private hospitals for treatment. All PPE and testing arrangements have been done alongside Public Health England to ensure that they're not taking anything away from the stock. So apart from the incredibly rare incident of, something terrible like a player having a cardiac arrest and needing to go to hospital, which could happen almost as much if they're at home or anything else, I really don't think that it will have that impact at all. It's all been worked through a lot. The one point I would say to Nigel, I think maybe about his messaging was he talked about the importance of supporting the rest of the football infrastructure. And actually, that's why it needs to come back, because the money and the top level of the game keeping going, that does flow down. So there are solidarity payments, there are transfer windows where players are signed, there are further contributions made by the Premier League to those clubs. So actually, I do agree that the main reason is the clubs want to keep their cash flow running, but don't forget some of their cash flow does filter down into the football pyramid. We can probably both agree not nearly enough, but it does, and it's certainly been one, not the major, but one of the important factors of keeping things going. Also, remember that we're going to see it get complicated anyway, in that players' contracts end on the 30th of June. So if you'd have not started till mid-July, you would have had a lot more difficulty kind of finishing the season with the integrity of the players' contracts.
I mean, I think for me, one of the main things was, as much as we all love football, health, life is certainly number one, and there's nothing more important than that. And I was quite sort of happy and proud actually that when I heard about all the testing that's being done that isn't taken away from NHS resources, it's all funded by football, and I think in that way football has handled itself quite well. So I mean, so we've moved on. We kind of we get why football's coming back and tend to agree with it. I know Nigel had a few points there, but obviously the big thing is fans. And 3 months ago when this all happened, mid-March, I remember you, Tim, were very adamant that football shouldn't be played behind closed doors. And I bet you there were a lot of people like you. Most people shared that view. But as time's gone on, I think we've all mellowed a little bit. So, Tim, I mean, your views changed. Why?
Well, needs must. In some ways, go back to what I said. We have to finish the league for its integrity and to produce results so that you can structure next season. We do need to protect the income streams, but it's not just about paying millionaire footballers. I think Arsenal employ 800-900 people, and then there's probably another 2,000 people employed by secondary suppliers, and you can multiply that across the clubs. I think it's important for people. I actually, from thinking that I, wouldn't open the curtains. Well, it's a slightly wrong analogy, because wouldn't watch behind closed doors football. But now I'll give it a go. And we might come on to talk about different things they can do to improve that experience. But it's needs must. It's needs must. And I must say, I'm much more wary of the idea of a 38-game season starting in September if it's still behind closed doors. Although I know it probably has to. That feels like a real slog. But this is kind of going to be exciting. It's a bit under a quarter of the season. It's going to be different.
Something new, isn't it?
Yeah, something new to talk about. Something different. Every game is about qualifying for Europe or not being relegated. So I'm almost excited for it.
Good.
But what a great opportunity for match-going fans to be really appreciated in their absence. So as the TV contracts have gone up and up and up and up, and we know that the TV companies are paying something like £11 million per Premier League game they show, and the percentage of gate receipts as a part of the whole diminishes, all of a sudden people are going to realise that it's the fans that make the TV companies able to show these games and make them such a spectacle. So the whole issue about 20's plenty and the away ticket pricing and the fans not really getting their view across. I think a 9-game mini season now without any fans, with a little bit of organisation, there was a lot more power to the elbow of the fan groups to say, don't forget us. And when we're talking, and I don't know how that get mobilised, it's through the supporters trust and everything else, to say we do have a collective voice, and whilst our pound in the pot might be smaller than the other people, it brings the other money in. Without it, the other thing doesn't flow.
That's absolutely right, Nigel. Absolutely right. And if you remember the campaign the Arsenal Supporters Trust was very involved in a few years about away ticket prices, one of the reasons we kind of were pushing on a half-open door there with the Premier League and Richard Scudamore at the time was Richard was very conscious that away fans in the ground are a vital part of the spectacle. it doesn't look like a contest if you don't have fans of both sides in there. Look how often the TV cameras scan onto the away fans. It's one way of showing the battle, the tribalism, the colour, and definitely, and the Premier League, it hasn't grown to be the world's most watched football league on its footballing standard necessarily. It's done it because every single ground is pretty much full, noisy, the stands are close to the pitch. Everyone at the Premier League will tell you that it is the contribution of fans, and now they're going to have to work out how to do it without us. Although some people, Akil, might bring us onto this, but some people are worried that they might actually work out ways to do it without us, and we won't be needed back.
Well, I mean, I was just going to say, Nigel, you mentioned the Bundesliga, and obviously that started about a month ago. How have you found that, and what's your personal experience there? I mean, mine's been very much the first weekend. I was really excited. I watched it all, and I don't think I've watched it again since. I just couldn't get into it. Just really couldn't get into it. Maybe it'll be different in England, obviously, because I'm more invested in it. I mean, there's obviously Arsenal, but all the players I know. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. It was great to watch that first weekend, and it really helped that there was the Dortmund Munich game as well. And sorry, that was the second week.
It was second week. I watched that.
But we're not vested in the players. We don't know their back histories. We don't know their stories. We don't know. So I think that's what makes it more interesting. Someone was telling me that the intensity of one of the games they watched was unrelenting, and I'm thinking, you just don't see that when you haven't got that sort of background narrative with it as well. So if you're a complete purist, you can probably watch it and enjoy it. Let's assume you're a scout and you were just watching Jadon Sancho or someone like that. But it's the ebb and flow of it, which I think is which really sets the tempo.
And Tim, there's been talks about adding crowd noise and putting cardboard cutouts in seats, and there's been lots of talks about suggestions, having screens across on Zoom, and letting the one I heard just today was letting sort of fans celebrate, which will come up on the big screens, which obviously it's a shame if you're at Anfield or Old Trafford because you're not going to get on any screens because they don't have any. But generally, what are your thoughts on all those kind of gimmicky things? Or do you think actually we don't need that? Our sport is so strong, we don't need it.
Well, the best answer is to say we don't know yet, because you have to watch it and see. I was talking to a couple of marketeers in sport today, and they showed me a clip of the rugby league from Australia, where they've been adding the crowd noise. And they had the same response down there, which is most fans said, we don't want that, but most are using it, because actually it's better than not having it. But at the moment, we just don't know, because I've not watched a behind closed game with artificial noise added. I can only give you an impression view. I can't give you the reality of having experienced. Now, we got an update from Arsenal's managing director today, because we did that survey as the AST, and he said, and it makes sense, he said, in a way, it's not really a debate to worry about because the broadcasters are going to give you both. And that, of course, that's the right way to do it, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
The real way, back to Nigel's point about do they need us, of course, the technology is there to have computer-generated image fans. So, so maybe they don't need us.
I've already sent my my little mugshot in for Block 31.
Well, one of the interesting things would be to see how the players react in terms of simulation, attitude towards officials. It's not social distancing, but in your face sort of type of behaviour. My sort of impression from watching some of the German footballers, there's a lot less downtime. The trainers are on the pitch less. There's no one trying to con anyone because they haven't got 30, 40,000 people making a spectacle about something which we've seen from a big distance. So I'll be interested to see how that goes.
I think there have been statistics. They've actually looked at the length of time the ball is in play and the number of rolling on the ground and challenging the ref, and they've actually shown it's reduced in Germany. And the theory is that they haven't. Is it that they act up to the crowd, or is it the crowd makes the noise that causes them to react? But yes, the sterility of the ground seems to be causing a more neutral or a more passive approach by the players. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it probably depends on your view of players acting up.
Yeah, I guess the sort of it's like a theatre. If a theatre was empty, you're likely not to put in those theatrical performances. Whereas that's maybe what's happening with football as well, because you got to watch your language, your swearing, your all sorts. You know, they've got to be. It is a different game. Sorry, Nigel, what were you going to say?
But how will it come back? Because we're not just going to go from 0 to 100. I mean, when we get these stage crowds coming back in terms of percentages, how are you going to get half a ground in there or 25% of a ground? Have you got any idea how that can work in practice?
Yes, some work is tentatively being done on that by the clubs and by sports grounds, and actually that what they have to look at, the difficult bit isn't people being in their seats. That's relatively safe. The difficult bit are the turnstiles, the toilets, the bars, the gangways for coming and going, where you get like pinch points. So, you know, probably, and this is going to think about this as a challenge. The AST will have to get its head around this complicated one. Let's say you start off with 10,000 allowed. How do you choose for 10,000?
Exactly. Exactly.
But also, it will probably be an experience to start off with, where the 10,000 won't be able to have food or drink. Now, you could say that doesn't matter so much at football because people come in and out. But remember, they'll probably be coming from an environment where the pubs still aren't open in that case, or are very limited. So everything will change. But what I would have told you, again, Akil went back to March. I think in March, people thought there'd be a whole season next year without fans. I now feel that there will be fans in the stadium next year, but I wouldn't necessarily think it will be anywhere near a full stadium.
And are we going to go to mandatory face masks as we've now got for public transport, or what's the protection measures going to be for those people?
Well, imagine the queues outside the Emirates if everyone has to have a thermometer pushed to their head on the way in. Or no one quite knows how this is going to be resolved in a broader sense in society. Are we going to carry immunity passports? So will you, they are working on a 10-minute test. So will you have to get your finger pricked outside the ground before you're allowed in? No one, no one knows. But if the Premier League starts in September again, I still think it will be behind closed doors.
I think with those challenges around gangways and all that, I think the Emirates is obviously quite spacious. There's a lot. It's probably a little bit easier to do. But you think of some of the other grounds in the country where it's a lot tighter, you haven't got that space. I mean, the last game Arsenal played away from home was Portsmouth. And Nigel, you remember that. We were both there and how tight that was on the stairs. And you think of
but then Arsenal have big problems in other areas, which Arsenal is basically a ground that you access by public transport.
Yeah.
Whereas at the moment, they're trying to not make public transport busy. So some of the grounds that have got big car parks sort of in less built up areas, there's so much to address now. But that's I don't know, that's sort of thinking about September, October, not June the 17th, which is only a fortnight away.
It is. And so moving on, Nigel, I mean, we've talked about the financial implications and I think if there wasn't TV broadcasting refunds to make, maybe this would be a different conversation and maybe actually the season wouldn't be coming back this soon. But there are. But what would have been the financial implications if the season was called off for whatever reason financially for Premier League clubs? We know about the lower league clubs, but for Premier League clubs?
Well, the 9 games which haven't been played, I mean, ignore the 2 for the Carabao Cup, but the 9 games, that's 25% of the season. So the TV companies have paid something like 760 million in advance for products they haven't received. So first of all, we thought the whole of that money would be at risk. Well, we understand that probably half of that money is at risk. So if we take the 760, divide it between the clubs, that's about £40 million per club. There still will be a rebate on that 760, somewhere around about 340 million, which is closer to 17 or 18 million per club, because it's clearly a very different product which is being delivered. We're also coming into May, June, July, which are typically no income months for the clubs. So at the time when you haven't got any money coming through the door, to have had that money taken away from you would be a double impact. And every club has some sort of different ownership model. People may have seen that how Tottenham have, some clubs have been using furlough, some haven't, some have access to other sources, some have got rich owners, some have got medium rich owners. I think it's a lot tougher for clubs than people realise. Newcastle are not refunding season ticket holders. I mean, can you imagine that one? There will be uproar at Arsenal if that had happened. There's uproar in Newcastle, but just to say we're not going to refund you for the behind closed doors. I mean, it's amazing, and I'm quite surprised the Premier League doesn't take a stronger view on this and tell their member clubs how to behave.
Yeah, I don't think we've heard the last of that Newcastle story. I mean, Tim, obviously TV pays for a product, so there'll be some people out there thinking, well, they're still going to get the games, so why is there still a refund?
Because they're not getting what they paid for, which was, a season played with full houses, finishing in May, and other aspects of the competition. It's in effect, it's sort of ultra vires or force majeure, if you like. And they could have, I think, probably had the right to ask for all the money back. It could have got a very complicated legal case. One of the things, because of course the broadcasters are in it, they've got a kind of mutual relationship because they want football to stay healthy, so they can sell subscriptions next year and the year after. And I don't know if you saw, Nigel, but I think one of the things they're proposing to do is they will pay the money now and take their rebate off next year. Yeah. And the idea of doing that will be to help clubs with cash flow, because it basically means that clubs can not spend anything on transfer this year, cut the wage bill, and it will help them through. And that's the sort of mutual support relationship, because Sky don't want to, it would be a disaster for Sky if 2 or 3 Premier League clubs went under, because you haven't got a competition. They also don't want too many players leaving or people to think it's a substandard product. So that's why you get these kind of negotiations. But certainly it is going to be, a really tough time. And I think you did your analysis of Arsenal's debt position, and you think they're probably using an overdraft facility. So it's not as big as Spurs going to the Bank of England for a loan, but Arsenal will be increasing their debt as well at the moment.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's time for a football reset, isn't it? You just mentioned transfers there. I mean, clearly that market's going to be very deflated unless you're owned by a state or an emirate or something like that, and maybe some of those will be trying to take advantage of clubs which are owned privately or corporately. So we're going to see a lot of changes coming our way for sure.
I mean, Nigel, just on that, I mean, the perception outside of football and maybe people who don't watch football is football clubs have got a lot of money. There's unlimited money there. But actually, that's not the case, if we've seen. I mean, where does football clubs' money actually come from? And do they sit on piles of cash?
No one's sitting on piles of cash. And they've always said about football, how do you make a big pot of money, a small pot of money? It's like buy a football club. I mean, what is changing, of course, is as we get more and more financial investors involved in Premier League clubs. I mean, don't forget the Premier League is 20 clubs. You only need 14 of those clubs to vote for something, and that becomes a rule. So if eventually they don't want relegation and you can get 14 clubs to vote for no relegation, that's what will happen. I mean, the FA would have to bless it in some format. But where does the money come from? The 3 sources, it's number 1 is television money. Number 2 is gate. And number 3 is commercial. Commercial will overtake gate before very long. And this goes back to what's the value of the fan in the ground. At Bournemouth, smallest ground in the Prem, something like 10% of their total income comes from their gate receipts. At Arsenal, it's 25%. So people aren't sitting on big piles of cash, that's for sure. They spend the vast, without transfers in and out, they're spending on players, and that's where it goes, the vast majority of what's coming in.
We've seen sort of, lots of companies in the country use the furlough scheme and stuff like that. And obviously there was a few football clubs that were going to use it, but did a U-turn probably because of the PR pressure and stuff. But I mean, generally, would you say it's fair to say that football has been sort of one of those industries that has had to sort itself out? As the crisis has happened, It hasn't been helped by the government, and not in a malicious way, but it hasn't taken government help. It's sorted itself out. It's bringing itself back, using all those health stuff that Tim mentioned at the start, it being very safe, paying for the testing, all that kind of stuff. So actually, is there a sense of, football fans and football's always treated a little bit differently? Football fans are always treated quite badly. And, people, as I said, have a perception there's so much money in football, all that kind of stuff. But actually, has football behaved itself really well and actually responded to the crisis really well, in your opinion? Tim, first.
I think largely it has. Football is like a cipher for society. So whatever the debate of the day is, be it paying minimum wage, over the years, be it using the furlough scheme, be it like NHS testing, whatever the debate of the day is, people overlay it onto football clubs, and disproportionately, they're very, very, very small entities in the size of the economy. They just get huge amount of media exposure. I thought the sort of attack on the footballers by Matt Hancock and others was disgraceful, really, when, there were so many people that if you want to look at, you could have called out. Some football clubs use the furlough scheme, but the Chancellor set it out that with conditions and anybody could use it. He didn't put an asterisk saying you can't use it if you're a football club. And I think a lot of the clubs do use their brand, their reputation, their profile to do a lot of good things in the community, and that should be welcomed.
Nigel?
Well, I think let's take the furlough and the quickest U-turn, which I think was probably somewhere about between 24 and 48 hours, was Liverpool. And Tim's mentioned the number of employees that the clubs have. So let's say you've got 70 or 80 playing staff. Your total for a big club will be 700 or 800 staff. So when Liverpool went to put, and I forget how many people they were going to put on furlough, some of the journalists were very quick to point out that in the last transfer year, Liverpool paid £43 million to intermediaries, to agents, to make those transfers of Alisson and Van Dijk happen. You're thinking, right, so we haven't quite got the balance right here. Every player, the average salary in the Premier League is 60 grand a week. It's £3 million a year, the average. And let's say every club's got 25 first-team players. That's 500 players. So it's the balance between what the clubs are doing for those high-profile players and what they're doing for the 95% of the staff who are on average wages. And I think that's where they didn't get the message right at the very start.
Although sometimes, Nigel, it is, if you peel back a layer, what you find underneath is a bit more complicated. So, for instance, at Liverpool, the employees who were furloughed at Arsenal, they wouldn't have been Arsenal employees. They would have been Delaware North employees, a lot of them, and quite a lot of them haven't even been furloughed. But because Arsenal have pushed those people, if you like, off the books, you can, onto a company that has very low employment standards, it kind of gets forgotten or not looked at. Liverpool have kept them on their books where they have higher employment standards and were protecting their jobs by putting them on furlough. Now, I take the point that Liverpool, you could say, had some cash, but when you look at it, it's not always maybe as easy as saying that club's done a good thing, that club's done a bad thing. I think Arsenal have largely done very well. Their Achilles heel is, I think, that the outsourced staff, the staff that do cleaning, that do the searching outside the stadium, and all the catering staff, that a lot of them have not been looked after. And Arsenal put out a statement saying all our match day staff would be paid. I think most Arsenal fans would think the guy who pats down your jacket, the guy who serves you a pint, is an Arsenal match day staff. But they're not, because they're employed by an arm's length service company. So it's always, they could do better as well. They could do better.
Moving on to...
Sorry.
Go on. No, go on.
Are you surprised, Tim, that there's 20 clubs sort of doing 20 different things, or do you think there should have been some sort of unified approach to how the industry deals with employees? I go back to the Premier League is the 20 clubs, so you can do what you like. But I've been surprised at the different approaches taken by different clubs.
Well, football for a long, long time, before even the Premier League, has always taken the view that what the league does is run a rule book that's about sporting matters. So it sets standards. This is the size of your squad. This is when you can sign players. This is how you must register a player to enable them to play. And a big rule book, but it's never got into, if you like, the corporate standards that the club must have. So it's never, for instance, it's always been very, very hands-off on ticket prices. And that was why it was such a big thing when they set the away price, because it's the first time in 130 years that there's ever been any centralisation of the ticket price. And there's never been centralisation of your ownership model or how you run your company or whether you outsource. And increasingly they dip their toe into that water, and maybe it will come, but it's not like the NFL where they're all kind of part of the same company. They are 20 individual companies that have regulation at the centre. I think we'll see more as society kind of demands everything from don't have slavery in your supply chains, pay your staff decently. I think we'll increasingly see a pressure for environmental standards, all that kind of thing. I think increasingly we'll probably see Premier League rules of this is the standard you must meet if you want to play in our league.
And it could lead to a commissioner type of, a very strong Premier League leader, governor, commissioner, or some third-party governance, which would be something that... Yeah, go on.
And the big one that I think that this crisis may well accelerate, which of course, if you are an American investor who thinks along the franchise model, is you can't wait to have salary control. Because once you have salary control, that's your guaranteed profit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, just slightly moving on to our kind of final part, got a few minutes left. I mean, with football coming back, Tim, what sort of boost do you think this is going to give the country? Because, I mean, regardless of if you want it or not, it will be watched. A lot of it will be free to air as well. So, BBC are going to show 4 games. They're going to show their first ever Premier League games. They haven't shown any sort of Football League games since 1992 or something like that. Sky Sports are showing 25 games. The first weekend has, the Merseyside derby, free to air. What sort of boost do you think this will give the country at a time we probably need one?
Well, it will give an economic boost because the wheels start turning again. So people are brought back off furlough, newspapers, media providers, broadcasters need more staff to provide the content. More people will be working at the grounds on match day. It's only 300. So it's part of this process of bringing the economy back, which is important. But I also think there are an awful lot of people at the moment who are locked down at home. They are not allowed to travel to see friends and family. They can't pop down the pub. All of the socialising that we're used to has gone. So I think there being some football content is quite important for kind of morale, but you can take it a little bit further than that. It's kind of mental health. It's well-being. It's something that people can enjoy watching and doing and sharing. And it might be that we share by watching on Zoom and interacting with people, or through the WhatsApp group, rather than the more traditional model of going down the pub and watching a game on the big screen with friends and so on. But I think people will have a bit of a spring in their step that something is coming back, both to watch, but also at some point we all know, don't we, that the economy has to come back. We have to all get out and active again. And this is one of the early signs that we are moving back towards more normality. Yeah,
Nigel, any thoughts? Will it give the country?
I don't know how you feel, but this is week 11 of the lockdown and all that novelty and I don't want to say excitement, but all the things we were doing in week 1, week 2, week 3 just feel a little bit sort of tired and more difficult to get up for it. I mean, that's personally how I feel. So I think to get the football back on there, a game on the BBC will have, I don't know, an audience of 10 million people. I mean, that's a seventh of the country, or a fifth of England. So I mean, that's got to be good. And the other issue, as Tim mentions, is people have got to have some confidence that we will be getting back to a form of normality. We've got to start. We want people to get out in a safe way, keep safe, be sensible, stay alert, etc., etc. It's very difficult for people to say it's off and it's on. So how do you bring it back some of the schools have gone back this week, but very tentatively. Year R, Year 1, Year 6.
Yeah.
Look at some of the numbers involved in that. Been really very low. I think people are genuinely frightened. So we've got to get some things back there to show we are going to get back. We will definitely get back.
Showing light at the end of the tunnel. I think the Tim, what you mentioned about the mental health thing is massive for me. I mean, I've talked to people recently when I've sort of been doing a couple of bits on sport and stuff about, people that are shielding, vulnerable, potentially retired, live alone, who literally, they've got no routine at the moment. If they're not working, they've got no routine and they've actually got nothing to look forward to. And football is going to present them with the routine. They can plan their week. Okay, Wednesday I'm going to watch Arsenal Man City. Friday I'm going to watch Spurs Man United. Merseyside on Saturday. They can plan what channels. They can plan everything around that. Whereas at the moment, people are planning probably their Zoom calls and their visits, but it should be the other way around.
And something to talk about
around football. Yeah,
to talk about with each other. I mean, everyone's commenting that like the family Zoom call, it's kind of like run out of steam. What did you do today? Not much.
Yeah, exactly.
Went for a walk, made some banana bread. What did you do yesterday? Not much. Went for a walk, made some banana bread. It is like Nigel says, it's run out of steam. Mind you, Nigel, I am fascinated. Have you yet got round to the lockdown task of categorising that bookshelf A to Z?
I know what's there. They're all in funny places. But I don't know how long we got, Akil, but what are the risks of this 9-game season not completing? What could railroad it?
Okay, well, I can partly answer. There is, I think the clubs have pretty much agreed that they'll do points per game as the way to conclude the season if it is like not finished, and that's one of the reasons why they were very keen to get the delayed games, the Arsenal game and the other game played first, because then you'll go into a sequence where everyone will play at the same time, and they're going to be very strict of trying to make sure that you don't have like a staggered league for that reason. I think though people are confident, Nigel, but the only way you would lose it is if we went back into a national lockdown with the severity that they said no behind closed game football. They've even, in the meeting, was it today? I'm losing track of where I am. They even agreed that if needed, they would use neutral venues. Because one of the possibilities going forward is that Manchester might lock down, or there might be a cluster of outbreaks in Southampton and they lock it down. Now, no one's quite sure if that happens, if they'll lock down a biosecure football stadium or not. But they've even got provision to switch a game at the last minute around the country to get around that. So pretty optimistic it will be, and it will be depressing if we don't finish, because it will basically mean that all of us in all of our lives are kind of back to where we were on the 1st of April, which is a really tough, tight lockdown. Apart from that, I think we're good to go.
My two fears around that, Nigel, that there's two things. One less so, and that's the, football fans gathering at football grounds, and that has been a fear. It happened pre our lockdown. It happened in Paris when PSG played Dortmund. But generally, I'm quite comfortable about that. I don't think people will travel. I mean, my little fear is, the residents and people around the ground who live there. So you think about those transfer deadline days when you have a reporter outside of a ground, you'd always have people behind them. And we all remember when Mikel Arteta, our current manager, signed for us, there was lots of people there. Obviously live local, don't live far. My fear would be if they start to gather outside grounds, and then it may just give a little bit of a bad reputation. But I don't think that's a major thing. My other fear is if people then, I mean, we don't know what the rules are going to be like mid-June, end of June and July. But my other fear is, do people start just going to friends' house to watch football, breaking the 6-person rule, breaking the outdoor space, sitting outside in the garden, start to bring the part. I mean, Boris Johnson said on Wednesday in his government briefing that, at the moment people have been sitting outside, which is great, but the weather's changing. Don't start to bring that party of 6 inside, because that's the worst thing we want to do. But with football, there's nothing more than I want to call my mates around to watch that Man City Arsenal game. I won't, but can I be sure that everybody will follow the rules? I'm not sure. That's my fear. I don't know what you guys think about that. Nigel?
And what would happen if 5,000 fans congregate in a at a particular ground? Will they play the game and then not the next one? Because if you're a club facing relegation and you don't want a game to go ahead, you just mobilise a few people. It's not too difficult to turn up to wherever. I mean, you're not travelling 200 miles on the train. You just get the local people to say, we can get this game off. Or am I being too subversive?
Well, after seeing the protests in London for the last few days, and yeah, the protest stuff is right in terms of the right message, but certainly there's been lots of people breaking social distancing rules. I'm not
I
sure.
don't think it will be a problem, though. I mean, we asked this in the survey we did of AST members yesterday. I think we had 99% saying they follow the guidance, and always in surveys like this, there was one or two people who pressed the wrong button. So I think it's virtually statistically no one, saying that they will go. Don't forget also that if you go, you won't actually be able to watch it, whereas every game is being broadcast live for the first time, whereas normally you'd have some that weren't. So there's no incentive. All the pubs will be closed. I expect at the first sign of anyone there, they'll shut any local off licences or alcohol sales. So I'm not sure. Of course, people can carry it with them, but I just don't think they would. Of course, a slight anomaly of the rules is it would be absolutely fine to go down to a ground as long as you kept 2 metres from anybody else.
I mean, I guess my example at transfer deadline days is there's a Sky camera there that people are trying to get in and things like that. Whereas actually, in this case, there will literally be nothing to do if you went outside.
There's nothing to do. There's nothing to do outside.
Yeah.
And of course, there is an important role on broadcasters, like not to do vox pops outside or anything like that might encourage people.
Yeah. Cool. So generally, I think we're all excited. I think Nigel's been convinced as well in the last sort of 40 minutes that it's the right thing to do. But I think there's a lot that we just don't know, do we? There's a lot we'll wait and see. We don't know if this is going to be good, if this is going to be bad. But I mean, I'm personally very pleased football's coming back because I certainly need it in my life. So on that note, I think we'll end it. Chaps, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well done, Akel. Thanks, Tim.
And enjoy the next 2 weeks of family Zoom calls, but make sure you don't have any on the 17th of June and the 20th, I think, of June when we go to Brighton as well. So take care, stay safe, and speak soon.
Cheers.